Welcome to the Typical Sportsman podcast. I have a special guest, somebody I've wanted to have on for a long time, and the stars finally aligned. And I've got Mr. Curt Geier from Working Class Bowhunter on the podcast today. We have a really good conversation. I like the way that Working Class Bowhunter just has fun with it, but I also can tell that as hunters, they know how to flip that switch and then be serious about hunting. For me, that's one of the biggest things I look for in who am I going to go on a hunt with. Somebody that I can have fun with and enjoy camp, but also they're going to flip the switch and get serious about hunting. Me and Curt talk about all that. We also talk about just kind of the stigma behind being a working class bow hunter. And, you know, unfortunately, not unfortunately, they have some big guests on the show that other people would not consider working class. And so we just kind of talk through all of that. We talk about how they got their start. We talk about Curt's incredible season, 2 fantastic deer, back-to-back sits. It's a really fun conversation. We talk about things that the hunting community blows way out of proportion and things that they don't take serious enough. So I hope that this episode, I hope you'll find something of value in the episode. You're definitely going to laugh. We share a lot of funny stories and just have a good time along the way. But I hope you'll find something of value that'll encourage you in the way you carry yourself as a hunter. Guys, as always, this episode is brought to you by my phenomenal friends over at ScentLock. The BE1 Toolkit is a full toolkit for bow hunting, from your socks to your base layers, your outer layers, everything that you need. They've thought about it. And here's what I like about the BE1 Toolkit. It is a clothing system that is made for bow hunters by bow hunters. And so it just simply works. And they've considered things and thought about things that other companies haven't, that really benefit the bow hunter. Also, what really sets ScentLock apart is the activated carbon for maximum odor absorption. If you have not checked out the BE1 Toolkit, go to scentlock.com and check out the BE1 Toolkit. But guys, let's dive in with Curt and have a good conversation.
For the true sportsman, it's more than a pastime. It's a way of life. Embrace the lifestyle of hunting, fishing, and the thrill of the wild. Live the life. Be typical.
There are a lot of great companies making a lot of great bows. Pretty much, if you go buy a new bow today, it's going to be a good shooting bow. However, very few bow companies are still single family owned. Even fewer bow companies are Christian owned, which is a very important value to me. And third, very few companies are really looking to push the needle in innovation. That is why I align myself with Prime. Prime, when I made the switch to Prime and I got my hands on this RVX 32 right here, I spent so much time with that bow. I put so many arrows through it. I took it on several different hunts and several different climates and put it just through about anything you can put a bow through. And it performed in every way that I needed it to. It shoots really well. It balances really well. Super high quality. The materials that go into it are great. And then in 2025 comes the form, which just goes to show you that Prime is really looking to move the needle in archery innovation, which is something that's important to me. So guys, that is why I align myself with Prime. I would highly encourage you to go to a Prime dealer and shoot the bows. I would highly encourage you to go to g5prime.com and check out their full lineup. Prime makes a phenomenal bow, but it's also a company that I can feel good about standing behind and supporting. So go check out Prime for your next bow. All right, Curt, I have, I've wanted to have you on for a while. Just never, and for those of you that know the history of the show, for the longest time, I was the host of the Bear Archery podcast. And so, it's just hard to have other guests on, that represent other bow companies. And so, now that we've stepped away and done our own thing and partnered up with some other brands, the opportunity finally presented itself. We've got some friends in common. Mr. Bucky. I know he's a good friend of the Working Class guys.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know Bucky and not love him. You know, he's just one of those cats.
He's the best. First of all, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
back on the bear archery stuff, WCB, we're free agents in the bow market at the time of this recording too. So that's something that has also changed.
Really?
But yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But yeah, Bucky is the best. He's been hunting down here with one of my buddies, Austin Chandler, and the studio's not too far away. So we've been forcing him to hang out with us a little more, but one of my favorite.
I haven't, Bucky's one of those dudes, you never meet anybody and they're like, oh, I know Bucky. I don't like the guy. Like everybody seems to love Bucky. Actually, I just not so long ago I met up with some Boone and Crockett measurers here locally, needed to do some video work on some measuring of animals and what goes into that. And I didn't know this guy at all. And he shows up to measure these animals and we started talking, and he quickly found out that I knew Bucky, and just we hit it off with the mutual friend of Bucky. So yeah, Bucky seems to be making that happen all the time for me. So,
well, Bucky, the cool thing about him, one is he's a great friend. He's an honest guy. He's sentimental. He values friendship and he values that whole thing. So if someone's like, I'm not a fan of Bucky, I just understand that I probably don't even want to be friends with that person, because Bucky's one of the best people I've met in my life, honestly. And he's just been a supporter of WCB, and that's how we met. We met him at the Wisconsin open season show in Wisconsin Dells, and was just so cool to us from the rip that we just became good friends with him over time. So that's how that all kicked off. So
I don't know if you're listening, Bucky, sorry to rat you out like this, but one night we got done with an event. Pope and Young did an event at the Dialed Archery headquarters, and we get done with that and we go back. There was a bar in our hotel. And so we're sitting there, and we as a staff, we're just kind of doing like show reports and, you know, working through that type of stuff. But the other guys were sitting around drinking, and Bucky had quite a few. Mm-hmm. And this guy comes in, and it's like 2 a.m. at this point. This guy comes in pretty frantic from the parking lot. He's like, hey, do any of you drive a Dodge Charger? And Bucky pipes up from the back and says, why'd you hit one? And this guy, like, his face just went pale. He's like, yeah, I did. And Bucky's like, oh crap. Like, no, we don't, none of us drive a Dodge Charger. And the next morning we're leaving the hotel there to go back to the show and clean up. And we see a Dodge Charger, and this thing was completely moved from the parking spot. Like, dude didn't like sideswipe this. Like, it was moved out of the parking spot. The whole front end was gone. And so I take a picture and I send it to Bucky, and he's like, what is this? And I'm like, you don't remember the guy coming in last night talking about the Charger? He's like, no, I don't.
That's awesome.
That's just Bucky.
Yeah, Bucky's the man. He makes a mean old fashioned. So if you're hanging out drinking old fashions with Bucky, just beware. But it's one of the best times hanging out with him. So
yeah, he's
Bucky,
a lot of fun, man.
You. So.
Yeah, for sure. We do love you to death. Speaking of shows, like where's Working Class Bowhunter going to be? Where can they find you at show season? Yeah,
that's getting ready to kick off, which is a great thing. We have a lot of fun, but man, it's a grind. But we'll be at ATA a little bit. Obviously, that's not a public show. ATA. I think we're going to be at NWTF now. Iowa Deer Classic, Ohio Open Season Show in Columbus, Illinois Deer Classic, and then the open season in Wisconsin there in Wisconsin Dells. That'll be the last week of March. So, and then there's some late summer shows we're going to be doing, but that's a little far out now. But
yeah, you guys need to get the Pope and Young convention on your list, man. Come join us.
Right now, we're planning on being there.
That'd be awesome.
I think we're going to do it. I don't know in what. I don't know any details on it, but yeah, I'm planning on going. I've never been to one. I've always wanted to, but I think it's going to work out this year. It's enough distance away from our show schedule back to back weeks that I think we'll be able to pull it off. So,
which is why we do that. We also do it. A lot of our Canadian outfitters, Alaskan outfitters, that's kind of their opening. And so that's when they're not guiding. So that's when we do it. But yeah, man, it is. I tell people it's an interesting show to be at because there's not 75,000 people. I mean, if you go to Western, there's 70,000 people, and it's just crowded. It's busy. Mm-hmm. You don't have a chance to really have that one-on-one talk and communication with people. But at Pope and Young, it's 2,000 of the baddest bow hunters you've ever met. Like, and it's just legends walking around, and because it's not a busy show, they're not tied up. So like, I remember the first convention I went to, like I sat and had lunch with Chuck Adams and Tom Miranda and Michael Waddell. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this is not normal. It's a really fun show for sure. But man, I kind of want to dive into, I kind of want to dive into that because, you know, I mentioned Western, and well, first off, I want to ask you a question, and don't take this offensively.
Yeah. You probably
can't
offend me, honestly.
Okay. Is there a stigma? I remember one time I was showing a buddy, I'm like, oh man, Working Class just had on Jimmy John. Mm-hmm. And my buddy said, well, that doesn't make much sense because he's the furthest thing from a working class bow hunter.
And that's wrong too, actually.
Which is what I want to get into because I led into Western, but is there that stigma of like when you have a big guest on, people are like, dude's not a working class guy. Like he's, you know.
Well, there's a lot of people say that, but it's such a surface level thought because it's not, the show is not, let's just only interview working class people, because everybody in some way or shape or form, if they're self-made or have worked hard to get where they're at, is working class. You know, a lot of these guys that we're talking to aren't just born into success. But WCB is one, I think working class is a mindset on how you do things, but it's not that way, because WCB, I look at it as entertainment for the people who are going to listen. And the working class is the majority of our listeners. And so what I'm thinking is, because I know what it's like to grind and work and go to jobs that you don't love. And I was fortunate enough to like be able to do this for a living, but I'm listening to podcasts and I want to like laugh and enjoy my day and kind of have, like, I would say we're just as much a comedy podcast in the hunting realm as we are just a hunting podcast, if that makes sense. Because
for sure,
we're not we are a tips and tactics thing. We do kill deer. So you can't really say that we're not serious deer hunters, but we have fun doing it. We get it done. But I want to be entertainment for guys that are going to work and, you know, long haul trucking, welding, whatever it is they're doing to help them get through their day and give them something to look forward to. So that's how I view it. You know, when you say working class, it's like we're there for the working class. We're not necessarily there to only interview guys that work in a factory. We have done that. We've had regular people. We've had listeners on. But yeah, we've had guys like Jimmy John on. And a lot of people did say that, like, he's a billionaire. He's not working class. Well, I go listen to the episode. He talks about how he'd sleep in his car and smell like salami and put in crazy hours. And he finally just built it up to this crazy success. Yeah. So I kind of get tired of it a little bit, because online it's like, well, what are you supposed to do to be working class? You're supposed to just work and never strive for anything and stay at the whole level the whole time and never try and progress. And to me, that's just a kind of a bad mindset, you know, to have for yourself. And a lot of people maybe are jealous. So they say that because they haven't been able to accomplish things they wanted to, or maybe didn't think about it that way. I don't know. But, you know, it's just like, if I used to work at John Deere before I went full time with WCB. You know, if I was going to work at John Deere for the rest of my life, wouldn't it be a little weird if I was content being in the shop in the same position until I retired? You know, but if I got that raise and became a supervisor and a manager, and all of a sudden, you know, I get an opportunity to wear slacks and go in on the white collar side, all of a sudden, does all my hard work to get to that point go away because now my perception to somebody is different? You know, so I feel like some people are so successful that people discredit their hard work to be that successful.
Well, and that was kind of my response to those people were, well, like, why can't the working class that are listening still learn from somebody like Jimmy John?
Totally.
But then you hear it on the flip side of like your Michael Waddells or your Juries, and you know, they pitch the mindset of, these guys aren't working class. They get to hunt the best quality ranches in the world. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself is a stigma that drives me nuts. Like,
well, it wasn't always that way.
Right. And just because you have access to the ranches doesn't mean that the hunting is easy. Like, you still have to know how to pin down a big deer. But two, just because somebody makes their living in the hunting industry doesn't mean they only get to hunt. Like,
no one hunts for a living. Like, bottom line, no one hunts for a living.
Correct.
It's just not true. It's fun to say. Sometimes it's easy to just be like, yeah, that guy's a professional hunter. But there's a lot of people, the internet, I don't know. There's that. They hate on the success for whatever reason, or they don't agree with the hunting style, or, a lot of it is like Michael Waddell couldn't go to a national or state forest and kill a deer. And I commented back on one of them. I was like, okay, let me get this straight. You don't think he could go kill any deer, like just a deer in general on a state forest? You think Waddell couldn't do it? Do you think Mark Jury couldn't do it? And it's like, yeah, I don't think he could. I'm like, all right. But what I think is if someone's a good hunter and can figure out deer and is adaptable and has experience, it might take them a little longer in a place they're unfamiliar. But eventually, I promise, take Waddell or Mark Jury or whoever, especially for whitetails, and put them anywhere. And eventually, they're going to be successful. Well,
and my argument about the big ranches is not, the deer are still just as hard to hunt. They're not hunting high fence. They're not hunting,
canned
100-acre high fence.
Yeah.
Just because the deer are bigger doesn't mean those deer are just walking up to you if you shake a bucket. Like they're still hunting those deer. They just have better quality of deer to hunt. And that's why, like, I've always tried to push the mindset, and I haven't come up with a marketing mind behind it yet, but I've always tried to push the mindset of just know your trophy. Like, and what I mean by that is so many dudes want to go out and kill 180. Well, the biggest deer on your farm is a 140. So if you don't wrap your mind around that, you're never going to be happy. And so, I grew up in South Arkansas where you shoot a 115, that's a tank, that's a stud. And I remember thinking to myself, like as a kid, well, man, these guys all over social media, they're killing, 160s, 170s. Why can't I? But then when I realized, man, for me to kill a 115 is just as good as accomplishment for the guy, on the ranch in Kansas to kill a 170.
Yep.
It's just as much of an accomplishment. It changed my whole mindset of hunting, and it changed my whole idea of hunting. And so that's the same case. Like if I were to take, and I would consider Waddell a friend, so I can say this, I think he's a nutty redneck, but I do believe the dude knows whitetail. And I also don't think there's anybody in the world that knows whitetail like Mark Jury. Like the dude knows whitetail like the back of his hand.
Yep.
And so for him to hunt those ranches, sure, the max caliber of deer he's hunting is 200. If you take him into a place where the max caliber of deer is, 140, I still believe he's going to be able to pin those deer down. I really do.
Agreed.
And so that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, I think that's just the way it is, and people are just so quick to be like, I don't know. We did a clip. My buddy Devin was in town. Devin's from Salt Lake. He lives in Salt Lake. He grew up a mule deer hunter, and he came in. We've introduced him to the whitetail world, and he loves any type of hunting, first of all. But I asked a question to him, and we clipped it. We clip things sometimes fairly vaguely because it's interesting to see the engagement. But I asked him like, hey, is it true that the Western community kind of discredits whitetail hunters? And he kind of talks about, yeah, well, I did this, and you got to come, and some people, you have the farms and all that, and all the comments are like, come to this place and hunt. That's real hunting. And then there's so many Western guys comment on it. Mule deer is where it's at. Have yourself a real challenge, not knowing that Devin has 4 over 200-inch mule deer and 3 over 220. And like my response is just like, Devin is like the mule deer king in his area. I call him that. He doesn't call himself that, for the record, but it's just people are so quick to like judge him on something he said in a clip about whitetail hunting. And it's like, I don't know, just the hate, and people jump to conclusions, and I don't know. It gets old. I kind of find humor in it now where it used to bother me. Now I just
trust me, dude. When I first started working for Pope and Young, you're working with, most of my staff is out west. I'm in Kansas. Most of my staff is out west. And I got that a lot of like, dude, you sit in a tree and wait. And I'm like, listen, I understand. Like I've been on elk hunts. I've been on mule deer hunts. I understand those are physically taxing. You've got, 2 weeks to do it. You don't have history with these deer, but then when they come here, like I brought a guy here and he was hunting in Oklahoma, and a deer comes out and looks right up at him. He's like, what in the heck was that? Like, how'd that happen? And I'm like, well, that's the challenge of whitetail hunting. Like if you move at all, dude, they're picking you out. They're used to looking up,
Yeah.
Every hunting style offers its set of obstacles. And I always tell people, like, if you've never been whitetail hunting, which first off just blows my mind. Like when you talk to a guy out west, like I've always wanted to whitetail hunt. I'm like, then whitetail hunt. Like,
yeah.
But anyways,
it's the most available big game.
Yeah, it's the most available big game. It's like, I shouldn't say a number because I don't want to be wrong, but I think 60% more than all the other trophies combined entered into record books.
Yeah, totally believe it.
So when you're talking to somebody who's never whitetail hunted, I just tell them like, all right, imagine this, like where when you go into elk hunt, like you've got to spot them and you've got to stalk them. But with whitetail, the hunt is really, from August to November to figure out where do I need to sit, when do I need to sit there. And then you sit there and they come. Like we're hunting before we climb up in the stand.
Yeah, there's a
if
lot
that
more
makes
to
sense.
the equation to get your answer. And two, it's like, you take those guys out there that think that way. It's like, okay, now try to get up close in bow range of any deer now, and then narrow it down to try and get in bow range of what you're going to deem your target deer or a buck that you hope to find to be big enough to shoot, whatever that means. But you see that people comment on that and kind of like judge or come here and do this, come here and do this. But what that exposes, I think more than ever, and the more places I hunt, the more I learn this, that people who talk like that and make those claims aren't well-rounded hunters. They've never left that spot for the most part, or they have minimal hunting experience. Where I've, in the last 2-3 years especially, I've traveled a lot and hunted with a lot of people and met a lot of great people and good hunters and all that stuff. And kind of what I've learned is good hunters with good hunters figure it out wherever they go. And even if you don't leave that experience with like this judgy mindset of I'd like to see you try and kill one over here. You know what I mean?
Right.
You see that so much. It's just like, I read that. I'm like, you're not well-rounded as a hunter in your experiences.
Right.
If you see that, like I hunted Kentucky and Georgia this year, this fall for the first time. And the amount of messages I got, it's like, good luck down there. You're going to hate it. You're like the heat, the bugs and all that stuff. And then I went down there. I'm like, yeah, Illinois has all this too.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's not like I'm on Mars, that's how everybody acted. It would be like going down to Georgia. I'm like, yeah, it's hot, but yeah, there's mosquitoes in Illinois and it's humid up there as well. So I wasn't like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like I entered a new atmosphere. Right. So
that's actually and I've said this a lot. It's actually my favorite thing about the Midwest is you get 4 seasons. Like you go down to Georgia, it's just hot all the time. You never get a good winter. You never get a good fall. It's just hot. Whereas, Kansas, Illinois, Iowa, you get a good winter, you get a good summer, you get a good fall and a good spring. Like you get to experience all of the different weather. And so I did that one time too. I was going down to Texas. Somebody's like, oh man, you've never hunted in the heat before. I'm like, dude, Kansas, it gets, 110. I mean, we've hunted in heat before. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just the stigma in it. And back to the Jimmy John thing. Like I told that guy, I said, first off, I want you to understand something. I want you to understand that Jimmy John in the last 3 years has done more for the working class bow hunter and for conservation than probably any other single human being on planet Earth. And they were like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, these tags that he buys at auctions, for 750, 500,000, however much he buys them for, that goes straight into that government's conservation efforts. So he is helping us as working class hunters more than any other single person, maybe ever. And they were like, well, I never thought about it like that. And I'm like, yeah, because you just look at money and think they're just on a different planet than you. And that's not the case.
Well, they forgot about all his hard work, man. And look at this. Jimmy John flew his helicopter to New Windsor, Illinois to record with us. If that doesn't show how cool that dude is and how he looks at bow hunting and the people that are trying to like support bow hunting from the bottom up, that dude's aware and he is cool. He is so fun and flew in. We picked him up, drove 2 miles to the studio, recorded and got him back out of here. And he was off. It was cool. One of the best dudes I think we've ever met. And he's just a great guy. So
when did you guys decide that all of your guests would be in-house or on site?
Yeah. We started in 2015. We've been doing this almost 10 years. March of 2015 was our first episode. And we haven't missed a week since. So really, it was a few years, probably 2019, 2020, maybe, give or take some time. That whole podcast surge all came. All of a sudden, everybody's got a podcast. And we thought a lot of them were kind of half effort, to say it in a clean way. And all of them were Zoom calls. Well, if you ever worked, even worked at Deere or worked like here in the office, every meeting you have is a Zoom call. Last thing somebody else wants to do is listen to another Zoom call. And I get it. Sometimes you can do it and it's good and it works. Like this is a great setup because it sounds clean, doesn't sound like a Zoom call. But we had the opportunity to buy the studio. We actually have like a brick and mortar in downtown New Windsor. We bought the neighboring building, remodeled it, and we put all this money and time and effort into the studio that I pretty much said, we're only going to do in-person guests if we can help it, with the exception of, whatever we got to work with week to week. But we'll schedule out, get people here. It makes for a better listening experience, in my opinion.
100%.
You have more fun. And we kind of have like a whole system done, like there's a restaurant right across the street called the Depot, and people come in. We have a bar entertainment area built right outside our studio. So we'll hang out here. We'll go eat dinner. We'll come back, record. And then we have a bedroom and a whole like Airbnb set up here. So if the guest wants to stay the night, we'll stay up and entertain and hang out with them and just like really get to know them and really get to like be friends with them and give them a full experience, not just driving to some dude's basement to do another hunting podcast, which I think is kind of like, well, a lot of people think like, oh, I don't know the podcast, I'm going to go do it. It's in this guy's basement. We want them to come here and be like, whoa, these guys are doing it. They're kind of crazy and off the wall and have a lot of fun and whatever, but they care about the end result. They care about it. They care about hunting. And we just want the guests to have like, we want them to leave with like, man, that was cool.
That is cool.
And we want to
like
offer
that,
something
man.
that no other hunting podcast can provide their guest.
Yeah. Well, that's something like, it's almost my pet peeve. Like when you have somebody, I'll have somebody here for a hunt or, for whatever reason. Just recently, Trent Murphy came through, retired from the Buffalo Bills, and he was hanging out. Well, it got late and, he was leaving the next morning. And so it was almost like, well, you want us to do a podcast later, man, when you get home and we can Zoom. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, no, because they're so much better when you're in person. Like it's a real conversation. It's face to face. It's funner. It's more interactive. I mean, the conversation is better. It's just better all around. And so you're absolutely right, dude. And that's what like, sometimes at ATA, like I've got 4 or 5 podcasts scheduled at ATA, and some people are like, we'll just do it when we get back from ATA. And I'm like, but you're missing it. Like it's just,
you don't get it.
I mean, nobody asked their wife to go on a date and says, well, hey, I'll Zoom call you. Well, why? Because it's not as intimate. It's not as personal. Right. It's not as authentic. I mean, it's just, it's not. And so, but I did often wonder, I'm like, man, how do you get people to come? And, actually I don't know who sets up your scheduling or how you do that, but, like I know my boss at Pope and Young, Justin Spring, was trying to get there and do a podcast and just didn't work out. Timing and scheduling and, whatever. And so I just often wondered that and just kind of when that decision was made and how it worked. So,
well, we have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in building this. And we've built a lot of this here. And, we have a great friend group that helped and everything. So when we put the money and all that effort into this, I'm like, doing Zoom calls through this for every episode there'd be no point, why would we buy the building and do all this when we could just green screen it or whatever and make it look like we had it. But we just want to provide that experience. And and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but we get hit up a lot to do episodes, like so much that when we book out episodes, we're booked months out. And so what it did, it helped eliminate the episode requests because it's like, well, you have to come here. So, if we schedule you, it has to be in person. And so it kind of like, it's a good way to kind of pick and choose who's willing to get to you somehow and then record a good episode versus people who just want to jump on quick for exposure or whatever it means. But it's nice that way. Because if we did Zoom and in person, we'd have too many to even like keep our sanity. But it's nice, man, because we look forward to it every week on recording day. We have a set recording day every week, and we just have a blast. But this is an off week. We actually have a guest coming in tonight after this. And so we're doing 2 this week. But it's been the best. And New Windsor, the town, has like embraced us and loves it. And it's hard to believe that we have it, honestly.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. You guys do it and you do it really well.
Thank you.
I consume very little podcast. I really do. I don't. I listen to 2 hunting podcasts, Working Class Bowhunter and Remy Warren. And that's just because I think everything Remy says is just brilliant.
We're not
those are the only 2.
brilliant.
That's why I listen to you guys, because you just have fun. And it's not, so many times you listen to a podcast and it's just so like mind-blowingly boring. Yeah. And I'm sure, listen, I know don't start leaving comments saying, Dylan, you're mind-blowingly boring half the time. I know I am. But there's just, and that's why I enjoy you guys, because you just sit and have fun.
Thank you. And we should probably, because I imagine we have a lot of shared listener group, and I'm sure we probably have, there's probably a lot of your listeners that maybe are or aren't familiar. I don't know what the breakdown would be, but we are not rated E for everyone. And that's just the nice way to put it. Like when we record, we're recording for the guy that's going to work, that's going to go have a beer after work, that's wanting to go to hunting camp and mix up a cocktail and cuss a little and do that. We're a little unhinged, as some people have called us in the past. But that being said, we're very serious about our bow hunting. We're very ethical. We take that very seriously. Even though we're a little unhinged and have fun and we like to party and do all that and high five and joke around and be inappropriate, we take our hunting very seriously, and ethics are number 1 in bow hunting for sure. So
that right there is my biggest quality in who I want to go hunting with.
Mm-hmm.
There's some guys that just want to have fun and then they can't ever flip the switch and like hunt.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. There's dudes that like are, well, listen, I can say this because I don't think he consumes any podcast, and nobody tell him I said this. I had the pleasure of sharing camp with Chuck Adams, and the dude has no switch. Like, it is full hunt mode all the time. It's not like we're going to go back to the cabin and sit and play cards and hang out and have fun. That's not it. It's let's go to bed early so we can wake up early and get out there earlier. It's let's sit and look at pictures, in the evening. So it's all hunt all the time. Which is why the dude's one of the most successful bow hunters of all time. But I look for a guy that, like, if I want to go on a hunt with somebody, okay, can we have fun and hang out? But then also, can you flip that switch and let's hunt? Like,
oh yeah.
And like, I have a friend, his name's Aaron Zeesh, and he is the best I've ever seen at this. Like, it could happen in a second. Like, we were on an elk hunt this year and sitting around a fire midday, warming up, just literally cutting up, having fun. And then we see movement through the woods. Didn't even know what it was at that point. And I just see Aaron just the flip switches and it's like kill mode. And I'm like, how do you do it that quick? Like, I can't do it that quick. But that's what I look for in a hunting partner. And so I think that's why I enjoy Working Class Bowhunter, because again, you guys have fun and you enjoy the conversation, but then you can also tell that you're serious about hunting. And that's what I think I admire about you guys the most.
Well, I appreciate that big time. I always go back to this. I reference this question a lot. I did the fall podcast with Aaron Blythe, who's a great buddy of mine. I don't know if you know Aaron or not, but I can make an introduction. He's a great guy, great podcaster.
Yeah.
He does a really good show called The Fall. So I was on his show several months ago, and he asked me, do I think people think that we're serious deer hunters? And I thought that was a pretty cool question, because I don't know. I never really thought about it in detail till he asked that, but I would say probably on the surface, no, but like we put up results that says otherwise, we grind, we hunt hard.
Yeah. So, you just killed a stinking tanker, dude.
Yeah. I had a good year, man. I had a really good year. So, but yeah, like in the middle of the grind, like we're going every day. We come back here to camp. We have hunt camp here. I have friends come in from out of town, but yeah, we get back. We're strategizing together and we're sitting there. We might be having a drink while we're doing it, but it's jokes. And then when we're talking hunting, we're strategizing, we're game planning. So, and a lot of that is the result of, that is the result of like the season I've had. I've had a great season. So, best whitetail season ever, man. It's hard to believe. So,
yeah. And I do want to get into that. I want to talk about definitely that deer you killed, but I want to jump back to something you said earlier. You said worked at John Deere, grinded to get where you're at. How did Working Class Bowhunter come? Like, how did all this take place?
Yeah. So before I worked at Deere, I ran heavy equipment. I was like half heavy equipment operator, ran an excavator and unloaded river rock and sand barges. And then the other half of my day was wrenching on equipment, wrenching on conveyor belts, doing that whole thing. Basically it was a tough job. That part was, but, and I normally worked alone. So I would always listen to podcasts. And at the time, there wasn't really a lot of hunting podcasts. A couple of Meat Eater had started like right around the same time we started their podcast. But I was listening to Rogan. I listened to a lot of comedy podcasts. And I was doing like an internet video thing at the time with a few other guys and didn't really love it, but I was just doing it, And I was sitting there shoveling sand one day, listening to a podcast, thinking it'd be cool to start a hunting podcast. And long story short, we ended up starting one. I looked up hunting podcasts before we kicked it off, and everything I could find at the time. I'm not saying there wasn't something I would have liked, but from what I was able to find from my quick search this would have been 2014, mid 2014. I couldn't find anything that related to me, and everything was very dry and just not very National Geographic-esque, like just kind of monotone and a little lame. So I was like, man, I wonder how hard it would be to get that going, because I'm already kind of like interested in this media outlet stuff for hunting, doing the video stuff and whatever. And couldn't find anything. Decided to go buy equipment, even though I was broke at the time. And we just started, and it all kind of like we found our groove and haven't missed a week since. So we put our first episode out first week of March in 2015.
So did you grow up a hunter, or were you exposed to that later in life?
Yeah, I've been hunting since I was about 10 years old. So my dad grew up a hunter. Didn't really hunt deer because he said there wasn't a lot of deer growing up where he was at.
Yeah.
And then my dad got us into firearm hunting. And then basically my dad started bow hunting for whitetails. And then I followed suit, and I've been chasing it hard. I've been hunting hard since I was 10 years old. So
that's cool.
I'm 34.
That's really
now,
cool.
So
being somebody that's in the industry, you get to hear from a lot of people. You get to hear from a lot of, other influencers and other people that are in the industry, but also, like you said, hearing feedback from people and listeners, which is one of my favorite things to do. Mm-hmm. Negative or not, you got to laugh at the negative ones. I just did a podcast with Prime on the new form, and it's just so funny because people are like commenting like, this guy doesn't know anything about the bow. And I'm like, you're right. That's why I have the guy here to tell me about the bow.
Yeah. It's not a comment on everything I know about.
It's just like over and over again. This guy has no idea about this bow. And I'm like, I know, that's why I have BA here to tell me about the bow.
It's the point.
It's the point, moron. Anyways, so being somebody that gets to hear from both sides a lot, what's the biggest issue that you think that the hunting public, not the hunting public is in THP.
Yeah. The people,
but the general public of hunting people. What's the number one topic that you think that should be looked at more and discussed more?
That's a great question. I don't know if I thought about it in detail for preparation for this, but I would say, that's a tough.
I'll tell you mine.
For industry wise or for hunting wise in general?
For hunting wise in general.
Okay.
And I'll tell you mine. I'm passionate about the way that we as hunters carry ourselves. And I tell people, and that's kind of the whole brand behind Typical Sportsman of just live your life. And that's why I was so passionate about stepping away from bear and making it my own, because I'm passionate about telling people just live the life of a sportsman, just live the life of being a typical dumb redneck. Like, it's okay to show up to church late with your face paint still on. Like, it's okay to walk into Walmart with your Crocs, your camo Crocs,
Yeah.
Totally. I'm the type of guy that's picking your kid up from school with blood on his boots. But I also in the same breath, I tell people, you need to think about the way you carry yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's going to come a day when all of these non-hunters that we're exposed to very well could be given the opportunity to vote on our behalf as hunters.
Yeah.
And I want them to have a good mindset about me as a hunter when they get to the ballot box. And that plays so much more of a role with social media now. don't post pictures with tongues hanging out and blood everywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
that whole trend for a while, I don't know if you saw it, of dudes like sliding down a hill on their deer. Like, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't like that stuff either. That's a good point. That is something I have thought about. I have like a personal issue. I hate when people straddle their deer and take photos, like when they're like holding it by its head and they're stepped over the neck. And it's harmless when another hunter sees it, but it just looks kind of bad. But yeah, I think as a whole, generally we do a pretty decent job at that.
And it's gotten a lot better.
It's gotten a lot better. I think too, it's like anytime we post a photo, we try to make it as clean as possible. And if it's gruesome, like an entry or exit hole, I have a photo editor. I'll just blemish it a little bit to where it's not as,
right.
You know what I'm saying? And, but like perception wise as a hunter, I kind of have like this unique, I probably experience with it because I don't look like a hunter. I don't believe, I think if you see me in public or you see me at a trade show, I'm not wearing boots. I got flat Vans on and like, I look like a skateboard kid, usually, I'm tattooed. I got big holes in my ears. I'm not a common looking guy for what the industry thinks I should look like or what the industry is used to looking like, and I felt that early on walking around ATA show but I'm kind of a freak, to some people, especially, if I go to the convention, I'm sure there's a lot of old dudes that are involved in Pope and Young. They're going to be like, where did that dude crawl out of, and that's okay, because I'm comfortable with who I am. Otherwise I wouldn't look like this, but so I experience a lot of weird looks and stuff, especially at a lot of the hunting conventions, especially at Western Hunt, so.
I could see that. And that's something that is a topic that I think is blown way too far out of proportion of like, we have to look a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really like, and I think you guys have had on Corey Anderson.
Yep.
But I really like that he just kind of broke the mold of like what a hunter looks like. And I'm not saying he was the first one to do it, but I grew up reading stories about this guy named Dr. Warren Strickland and all of his crazy adventures and killing all these giant animals. But I don't think that I had ever seen a picture of him. And I remember I was at a show one time and I heard that he was doing a seminar. I don't remember what show it was, and I'm like, oh, I've always wanted to go hear Dr. Warren Strickland talk and share his stories. And I walk in and I was with a guy that knew him. Mm-hmm. And so I was like walking in with him and we're standing right in front of him, like 6 feet from him. And I'm like, where's he at? Like, I want to, if I can meet him before, that'd be great. He's like, he's right there.
Yeah.
And it was an old black guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, that is the guy I've read about my whole life hunting, but like being a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And so even myself, like I had that stigma of like, what should a hunter be and what should a hunter look like?
Yeah.
And so
just
believe it or not, man,
it's not really a bad thing on your part. It's just what you kind of have been expected to see.
Right.
You've been around so many hunters. Like, you see Corey, you don't expect a fighter, a black guy that's into hunting. It's just, it's uncommon. It just is.
Yeah. Which is cool.
I love it. Because I told
me too.
We actually brought it up on the podcast, and I was like, honestly, a little nervous. I didn't want to like seem like I was asking it wrong. And I even said, I was like, I got a question, but I'm not trying to come out of left field in here. It's like, dude, just ask it. You ain't gonna offend me. I'm like, you're a black dude in the hunting industry. What's the challenges? And he's like, getting permission to hunt places. And I'm like, oh, I can see about that. Going to a little old white lady's house with a farm.
Yeah.
Corey Anderson's at your front door. Now he's one of the toughest dudes on the planet. He looks that way as well.
Just standing over you with a gun saying, can I hunt your property?
Yeah. And he's a big guy, so,
yeah,
but yeah, that is funny. That's a good point. But so I don't I don't hear it as much anymore. It's changing,
and that's something that, I'm trying to think of his name, Bow Disciples. I can't think of his name. But we kind of had this conversation, and, discipleship, as far as the definition of the word goes, is sharing the news about something and helping somebody grow in an area. And that's what I think is so cool about seeing people that look different and talk different is you get to talk about hunting to people that I'm never going to get to talk about hunting to. Like Corey reaches people about hunting that I would never have the chance to talk to about hunting because I don't live in the fight world, you know?
Yeah. He touches a whole nother environment.
Yeah. And that's cool, man. And if we truly care about what's best for sportsmen, then we would want anybody from all different walks of life to participate in hunting. And that, hey, guess what? Going back to our very first conversation, that even includes billionaires that run in circles with billionaires. I should want them to be involved in hunting so that they can get their network of people involved in hunting that I can never get in front of. And so I actually admire it.
We're not buying governor's tags and they're going to sell them. I'd rather have Jimmy John buy all the governor's tags because I'm not going to be able to afford them. We need that money.
Yeah.
Buy them up, dude. Go for it. I want to see
100%
giant elk and sheep and everything else and spend your money, dude.
And so let me break this down real quick. And maybe I should have somebody on who's much more knowledgeable on this than I am, because I'm not super knowledgeable. I know how it works at the Pope and Young convention. Those governor tags, so many people are like, man, I wish they quit selling for so much money. They're driving the price of other tags. No, they're not. They're not at all. How that works is that money. So if we're auctioning off the bighorn sheep governor's tag in Colorado, all of that money, Western doesn't keep that money. Sheep doesn't keep that money. Whoever's auctioning off doesn't keep that money. All of that money goes straight to those governing authorities to put back into their conservation efforts. It does not raise the price of your tags. It does not make hunting more expensive for you. It actually does the opposite. It puts more money into the conservation efforts so that those herds can grow and be restored so that we have more hunting opportunities for those herds. So
it's bonus money.
Let's just break that down real quick. Let me share a little bit about why I am so passionate about Mountain Ops. Yeah, they make incredible supplements to help me in my everyday life, on the mountain, in the gym. Great supplements. However, they also support my rights as a hunter. They're also Christian owned, which is something that I value a ton. And then third, through Operation Conquer Hunger, for every order that's placed on mountainops.com, they're providing a healthy meal to a family in need. Guys, if you use supplements at all, I would highly encourage you to look at not only the supplements that a company is pushing out, but also what that company represents. So guys, go check out mountainops.com because it's a company that I can not only support because they make great products, but because they support the same things that I support. They support me as a hunter as well. So guys, go to mountainops.com, use code TYPICAL. That's going to save you a lot on your order, and you're still going to provide a meal for somebody who's in need of a healthy meal. Mountainops.com, discount code TYPICAL. Go check them out today. My favorite product by far is Ignite. I use it every single day. Before I podcast, before I sit down to work, before I go to the gym, I use it all the time. I use it on the mountain religiously. Ignite is my favorite product by far. However, they have a full line of supplements to help you conquer the mountain, conquer the day, conquer work, whatever you're looking to do. They've got something for you. Mountainops.com, discount code TYPICAL. Now, on the flip side of that, what do you think the biggest things that hunters blow out of proportion that you're like, and I don't think it's tags. I do think that's something that people blow way out of proportion, but this is something I haven't put much thought into, but I'm curious to know if you can think of a topic that like, man, just quit blowing that so far out of proportion because it's not that bad. You know what I mean?
I would say generally, this is more of a general umbrella term. It's just like hunters getting on each other about stuff. You know, like I think we're our own worst enemies sometimes. And I don't think in real life that we actually are, but real life in this day and age now is part of the internet because it's so prevalent in everybody's lives. Mm-hmm. But on the internet, it's like, I mean, the stuff that, man, if you guys seen some of the messages and comments and stuff that people say to us, and it's like, and you see it in, you know, we have a Facebook reel going up about Mark Jury talking about 5-year-old deer. You know, 5-year-old's a 5-year-old is a 5-year-old, no matter what's on his head. He's, you know, 5-year-old deer are smart and he don't know if he's 180 or 140. And the comments on that are insane. And it's like insanely negative. And I see that, and I'm like, man, that's crazy. Because we do a lot of consumer shows, and people will hate on us and give us negative comments and all that stuff. And my response, and I say this on the podcast, well, here's our list of consumer shows, our tour we're doing. You know how many people have approached us and said something stupid like they would in a Facebook comment to us in person at a trade show?
Zero.
Absolutely zero. And that right there is like my example. It's like in real life, it's okay. You don't really see that hunter against hunter hate, or I don't know. It's like bringing each other down a little bit. I don't really know what the term would be. But online, it's all over. Shaming. But, in person, it doesn't happen. So you take Facebook away or whatever, and then it's almost like, man, hunters get along. Add Facebook in. Everyone's like, hunters don't get along. We're kind of our own worst enemy. I think generally we do. And maybe there's the extreme examples, but I would say supporting each other no matter where you hunt or what you're hunting,
Yeah. Or what you stinking used to hunt. Like,
yeah,
that's like, listen, I have shot, I can do the math real quick. I've shot 3 deer with a rifle since I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
I don't rifle hunt much. Just shot one last month and at Thanksgiving with my dad. But other than that, I've shot 2 other deer with a rifle in, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
More than that in 17 years. And so I'm not a rifle hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And so many bow hunters put down rifle hunters. Like, why don't you pick up the real equipment and try to, kill them the real way? Like, okay, like just, again, who cares what you use? If it's a legal, ethical means of harvesting big game, I should celebrate that with you. I should celebrate. And I'll never forget, and kind of the reason I tied myself to the word sportsman rather than outdoorsman or hunter or bow hunter, because I'll never forget my dad. I was mad that somebody shot a deer I'd been hunting. Mm-hmm. And I was probably 17 or 18. No, I was in college. So I was 19. And I went back home to hunt, and the deer had been killed by a neighbor. Mm-hmm. And I was mad. I was upset. And I'll never forget my dad looking at me and saying, son, you can never call yourself a true sportsman if you're upset that somebody else was successful.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. Like, I'll never forget that. I remember where I was standing. I remember what we were doing. Like, I'll never forget that. And so now when those thoughts creep into my mind of like, man, why can't I, get lucky just one time like they do?
Mm-hmm.
I should be happy for those people, for those dudes. And I should celebrate that with them. I don't care what equipment you used. I don't care if you wore the same camo as me. I don't care if you shot the same bow as me. I can celebrate that in that with you because we're all sportsmen. We're all in this together. Yeah. And I would 100% agree with you on that. I think that's the biggest issue that causes division and causes hurt to the hunting world is just
totally
stupid comments.
Well, I will say this too, because someone will probably give me crap about it. Does that mean that I'm not going to joke around and give my buddies crap who hunt a certain way?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I don't think a lot of people put that anti-crossbow on us, anti-gun hunter thing on us. It's not true. I might believe there should be limitations on how seasons and stuff are structured, but we're not against it. But I'll give you a good example. I walked into Casey's gas station the other day. It was during firearm season. I see 2 of my good friends standing there in their orange, and I walk in, first thing I say, and he knows I'm kidding. The first thing I say, man, you lazy gun hunters are out of the woods already. And do I actually mean that? No, but it was damn funny saying it to him,
Yeah.
So it's that's a good example. It's, I might not agree with everything that involves what you're allowed to do with a crossbow in Illinois during season. Am I anti-crossbow? No. Am I happy for if you shoot the deer that you want to shoot? Yes. So, definitely not against it, but also too, you don't see me, even if I don't like it, you don't see me on the internet, ripping people out of the left field about it. It's a great conversation for a podcast talking about crossbows and what the season should be and what you think and what I think, but I'm not saying don't do it. And I'm not on the internet bashing people for doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's big
something,
difference.
I think you take that to another level. I think, and I don't think stick bow hunters are like this. I think other people think stick bow hunters are like this. Other people think oh, you're a stick bow hunter. You think you're better than everybody else. No, they really don't. They really don't. They're usually pretty stinking cool.
Typically, they're the most experienced hunters who understand hunting, like we were saying earlier, and kind of have more of a respect for all methods. That's what I see.
And I remember when I started down the journey of shooting a stick bow, that did happen with a buddy of mine. Shot a buck with my recurve and sent a picture to my buddy, and he authentically said, "Oh, did Chrissy get a deer? That's my wife." And I'm like, "You stinking, you jerk! No, I just shot this deer." And he's like, "You shot that deer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude." And he really couldn't believe that it wasn't my wife's deer. That, anyways. But I started working with Three Rivers. Yeah. And their motto is, stick bow only, trad bow only, trad only. And I got one of the shirts that said that. And somebody ran their mouth and said, "Yeah, that's just like all you stick bow hunters. You're doing this the only way to go." And I'm like, dude, it's just a motto. Like, it's just a quote. Like, I still hunt with a recurve. I still hunt with a rifle. I'll hunt with an AR. I'll hunt with anything. I don't care. And that was always the stigma when I started posting about shooting recurves or people would ask me, "So you're recurve only now?" And I'm like, no, why would I have to do that? Like, you make it seem like I can only hunt with one weapon.
Pick your side.
Yeah, it's not, there are no sides, guys.
Yeah.
And I actually tell people, I just tell them like this. I'm like, listen, I started shooting a stick bow so that I could be more well-rounded, not one-sided. Like, not so I could jump completely that way and be one-sided, but so that I could just be more well-rounded. And, I didn't even hunt with the recurve one time this year. I hunted with a compound all year.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not planning on next year going back to it and trying it again, but it just, that's what I wanted to hunt with. I don't know.
I ought to hook you up with my buddy Blake Garrett. He's a really good hunter. And I don't know if you know him or not, but he's got a cool mindset.
I don't think I do.
He's like, I want to kill these amount of species with every legal weapon in every state that I can, that he's interested in hunting. So like, he's done the crossbow thing. Cool. He's done the compound thing. He's done the rifle thing. So he's like, I just want to say I did it and had those experiences and all that. So that's kind of neat. I never heard that before he said that.
That is cool.
It's kind of different.
Coming up with his own slam, if you will.
Yeah, basically. And I think more for him, he just loves hunting. And it kind of opens up new challenges for him to how he's going to approach things. So it's pretty neat.
Do you ever find yourself like just coming up with stupid challenges in the woods?
I know what you're saying. I feel I'm so absorbed with my own personal like deer missions that keeps me pretty busy. But I do kind of think about like little stuff, like what would be the Midwest slam in a season? Like a doe, a buck, a coyote, turkey. Like what else? I think like that. I think that's what you're getting at.
No, I think of stupider stuff. Like,
okay,
hey, let's see if we can do this in a Santa suit. Like, just different weird stuff. Not only that, but like I do find myself challenging, like, and obviously a few years ago it was a recurve. Like, hey, I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to kill a deer this year. But now it's like, hey, let's hunt from the ground only and still hunt in Kansas, which is like mind blowingly hard because there's 7 trees in the state. But,
there's no like big
it's like, let's just try and still hunt and kill a deer this year. And it might be a doe or whatever, but like, let's just try that. Or, a few years ago, it was like, hey, I've never done the bow mounted decoy thing. Let's try that. Like, I want to kill a deer with a bow mounted decoy.
So I did that.
Do you ever find yourself pushing yourself like in different ways like that?
Totally. Yeah. One thought I had this fall was I want to try and kill a buck over a decoy. Just not a bow mounted decoy, but just a decoy in general. Cause I've never done it.
It's my favorite. Dude.
I invested in a good decoy last fall and I always like, I'm going to do it this year. And I get it out one time and I don't keep doing it. Well, I actually did it this year and, over a really good buck. And so that was like, I think one of them challenges like crossed off the list. Like, man, I got that decoy experience. Like when I first started saddle hunting, I'm like, man, I want to shoot a deer out of a saddle and just stuff like
tree
that.
Diaper.
Think about what's that?
A tree diaper.
Tree diaper, baby. That's right. And that's not one of those things people go, are you a tree stand hunter or a saddle hunter? I was like, well, I'm both because they're both effective.
Whatever works. Yeah.
You don't got to box yourself into one category of whatever you're doing. So, but yeah, I totally get it. That's fun to do.
I absolutely love decoy hunting. And when people are like, when there's so many people, it almost blows my mind. It's like, wait, you decoy deer and that works? And I'm like, yeah, you don't? Like, I love decoying deer. And one of the coolest hunting experiences I've ever had in my lifetime last year, it wasn't a great day for hunting, which is usually when I take my boy. He was 5 last year. And usually when it's going to be a good day, I'm like, I'm not taking you because I don't want you to blow it. You know, I don't want you to mess me up.
Yeah, he's young.
And so it didn't look like a great day, but it was the rut. And I had a good wind. And so I was like, you know what? I told my wife, I said, I'm going to take a decoy just in case we do see a buck. Like, it'll be interesting for my son. And so I hauled a decoy out there and threw it down. And sure enough, I see one of my shooters and he's like 250 yards away. And I'm like, oh crap. Like, I did not expect to see you here. And so my son just immediately says, can we shoot him, Dad? And I'm like, we're just going to give him a whirl for sure.
Yeah.
And he says, well, shoot it. And I'm like, son, that's 300 yards, dude. I can't shoot it right now, but we're going to try.
Yeah.
And so I just grunted at him one time, that literally one little bitty grunt. And from 300 yards, he turns, locks eyes on that decoy and comes 300 yards on a line. And I tell people two things. Like, if I didn't have that decoy, he would have never came in the first place.
Yeah.
But secondly, if I didn't have that decoy and he did come, I wouldn't have got away with it. Because my son would keep popping his head out of the ground blind. And I'm like, dude, you got to stay still, bro. Stop moving.
Yeah.
And, but the deer was so hyper focused on the decoy that he wasn't looking in the ground blind.
Right.
And so, man, I love decoy hunting. And usually it's fast and it's just gnarly. And it's, you know, you see cool stuff and you hear cool stuff. Like, I hear deer make different noises than I do without a decoy. Like,
right.
It's just really fun hunting. So I'm glad you got into it.
It'll be something I do now that I've done it successfully. It's something that I know it's possible to have some ideas after seeing firsthand experiences of like how the deer reacted. So I would think I'm just going to get better at it, but I'm going to try to make it a point to do it more. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. And then actually Eric, the next day, I believe Eric's one of the co-hosts and co-owner of WCB with me. He killed a deer over a decoy. I think, the next day or 2 days after I did. So we were just like, man, this stuff is working. So pretty cool.
Yeah. I've actually got scheduled Melissa Bachman to come on, who's very good at decoy hunting, and give me some tips because she does it really well. And there's been times where
up there too with it. I call him. He's my decoy. Call him decoy. Any advice? Yeah, do this. You know.
So what's he told you? Like, what are the tips he's given you?
A lot of it is like direction of the decoy and stuff like that. You know, it could be simple stuff. And it's obvious when he tells you, like, the big thing is like, well, where's the wind blowing? Where do you want the deer? If he's going to circle windy, where do you put the decoy to get that deer to slice closer to you? So it's a lot of stuff like that. You know, I always forget what I did with mine, how I killed mine. I had a west wind. I was on like a creek line and I had the decoy pointed at me, his face pointed at me. Cause what I wanted that deer to do is to come between me and the decoy and circle up to his head. I just assumed a buck would rear up to another buck head to head. And this is an older buck. I knew him and he kind of skirted and was going to kind of loop around the back side of him and come around the other way. Same concept, but he was just trying to go a little wider and get downwind before he circled. And I shot him before he got all the way downwind. I just took my opportunity. But so that was my thought process. I had the decoy I think I had the decoy too close to me for him to want to do that comfortably. So we decided to go the other way. But I'm sure it depends on the deer, you know.
I've heard tail. I've never tried it, but I've heard a lot of people say that if you take one of the antlers off of the decoy, then they'll come to that side of the decoy because they're going to go to the weak side before they fight. And
that's what I've heard as well.
I've never tried it. Because to me, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't know. Again, I that's part of why I like decoys, because it gives you something else to just experiment with, see how they respond, see how they act.
It's motivating.
What's interesting to me is,
you know,
100%.
Because like what you said with your buck, you saw him way out. I was sitting on this field where it kind of like rolling hills down to me in this bottom of this field. And it gives you that motivator because like all this big deer's got to do is hit this field. And I could be in the cards. Like he could see it and just decide to work down, whether he's in a hurry or just comes down to see what it is. And it takes him an hour. That was the motivating thing about it. I got lucky and the deer that I was hunting crossed the creek and popped up like 60 yards down the creek line or down the field line on the creek and saw the decoy and ripped off a huge grunt. And right when I heard that, cool. I'm like, oh, he's convinced. So, and I have it on
which film again is something like you don't get to hear grunts a lot. Like don't hear deer grunting all the time. And,
or
and so I've just found like, yeah, with a decoy, you get to hear more and see more. And, the deer I shot in Kansas this year, I can think of a handful of times I've heard a snort wheeze. And this dude, before I killed him, I saw him for probably 3 hours before I killed him, because he was just chasing does all around me. Like, and I heard 6 different snort wheezes before I killed him. And I'm like, dude, I've heard that like 3 times in my life.
Yeah.
And you've given it to me 6 times today. Like, it was just so cool. But I also like, and I think it's important, like with decoys, to watch how does respond. Like if you're in a heavy feeding area, watch how those does respond coming through. Cause I've had, a brustled up buck decoy before. It just, looks like he's ready to fight, and does step out and like, I don't want to be harassed by this guy. And they, move around.
Yeah, totally.
And so, then you put yourself in a different predicament, because it's like, well, crap, that buck's coming to fight this buck over the does that are over there. So if he can just go get those does, like, he doesn't need to come fight this guy. Yeah. So I think it's important to also look at those, just how deer interact with each other and how they interact with that decoy.
Well, I'm familiar with 2 decoys. I haven't used one, but my buddy's got one at his cabin. He's got like an awning where they're both sitting next to each other. And one I laugh at every time I see it, because it's huge. Like the decoy is massive. I'm like, I don't feel like deer are actually that big. That's thing's gigantic. And it's all stiff and like,
this thing's a horse, bro.
It's a horse. And I'm like, yeah, that thing works, huh? And he kind of knew what I was saying. But there's another brand decoy, the one I have, that's small bodied. I'd say about the size of like a good doe. And
what brand is it?
It's a DSD.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah, it's not, I'm referring to the other one being like the Boss Buck. It's huge.
Yeah.
And that DSD, I think, is small enough and realistic enough that, like, I actually shot a doe over it. I shot a doe and a buck over it this year, and the does were like feeding around it. And I had one doe just get weird with it, and I didn't want her to kind of ruin it. I needed deer meat anyway, so I used it for a little practice, and it was cool. But so I really like it. I really do like that decoy.
Yeah, Dave Smith decoys are like, and I have no affiliation with those guys.
Yeah, me either.
But like if you like, I remember walking through Cabela's one time and seeing it. And I'm like, that looks like stinking taxidermy. Like that looks like a real deer. And so I've always wanted to try. Yeah, you stinking like $600.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to try the Montana decoys, because I know like Eichler's big in those, and they seem to work for a lot of people. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, it's flat. Like if a deer comes in front of it, how does it not notice that deer just disappeared? Like how does it not notice it's gone?
Yeah.
And so, but then you see people using them, and I'm like, well, they work. I mean, I've seen videos of people killing over them, but I don't get it. I'm like, if a deer is circling it, how do they not look and go, oh, where'd it go? Like,
I think a lot of it's just situational, like where you're hunting, how you're doing it, what your opportunity is. So, I mean, for me, I'd probably try and set it up to where the deer circles and is going to see it's flat. There's my shot. But, that's hard to predict a lot of times. But I think too, it's all situational. When they work, they work. And if they don't, they don't. Just like any decoy, probably.
I would do anything to go back. My dad is the definition of a typical sportsman. Like just always doing stuff stupid. Like, where you just shake your head and think you're cute, Yeah. I would do anything to have had taken a picture of this and been able to keep it. But when I first started hunting the decoy, I remember telling my dad, I'm like, dude, you have to get a decoy. It's so fun. It's the coolest thing ever. Well, my dad's the kind of guy that doesn't spend like the penny on hunting at all. Like he won't do anything. I'm like, Dad, come to Oklahoma and hunt with me. He's like, tags are $300. I can kill him in Arkansas. Like, I don't need it. And I'm like, come on, Dad. Like, but he doesn't ever buy new bows. Still shoots like a 2007 Hoyt,
X-Tech or whatever.
Yeah. I don't even remember the name of it. But before that, it was like a 1984 Game Getter. Like, anyways, doesn't spend the penny. And he's like, I'll go get me a decoy. I'm like, oh, cool. And the next time I went home, he had cardboard cut out, like he cut it out himself of just the shape of a deer and then spray painted it
That's
to
awesome.
look like a deer. And I'm like, is that working? He said, no, they don't. These stupid decoys don't work, dude. Every deer that sees it runs off. And I'm like, I bet it does, dude.
He
It
lumps
smells
all
like spray
decoys
paint.
into that category, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
all right, yeah,
It was great.
You're right. Decoys don't work. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, decoys suck, Dad. You're right.
Yeah, wasted time.
But then he ended up getting the Montanas, and I don't know that he ever used them, but he did. He's like, I better buy some better ones, and bought the Montana ones, but I don't know that he ever used them. So tell me about the story of that giant you killed this year, dude.
Yeah, I had a good season, man. So I killed the 9, which I actually have them right here. I can show them if you want, but the 9 is the one I killed on the decoy. And then I'd been hunting so hard up to that point, and I don't want to say I was having a frustrating season, but just I put in a lot of hours all the time. So I took the week off. So I killed that deer on a Sunday night, took the week off, hung out with my kids, spent some quality time with the family. And then the next time I went hunting was the 14th. That's when I killed the big one. They're both big. I just call that deer my big one because it's my biggest buck. And it was just a hunt of hunts. Like I went in, got in the stand about 12:45, and just walking in, I was like noticing all this deer sign that was ripped up that wasn't there before, scrapes. And, you look at it, you're like, wow, that's all fresh. This is looking good. I get in, see another buck that I knew that I considered him my number one, actually. And this deer is kind of a bonus deer. It's not like I have like a bunch of history with this buck I ended up killing.
Yeah.
But I was set up in the timber, just a beautiful spot, not too far from an edge. And I saw that deer run off with a doe, and there just must have been a hot doe in the area, and looked down and see this buck. And I knew about him from all his kickers and stickers. And all I seen was flyers off of his left side as he was working down through this bottom. And then I grunt, snort, wheeze. Was super windy, so I don't even know if he heard it, but I knew he was down in there, and I kind of lost sight of him.
Yeah.
So I rattled just to throw the kitchen sink at him, and he came in right in. He actually went downwind. I shot him at 17 yards, double lunged him, and he ran out into cut corn and watched him fall over in the cut corn. So
that's cool.
All on video too. So I was an emotional wreck. It was crazy.
That's something. And that's why I encourage people to try new things, like do things differently and just push yourself in different ways. Because I grew up and, with my dad, it was you sit still and you don't move. Mm-hmm. Like we're not going to add any noise or any movement to anything. And so we never grunted, never rattled growing up. I had no idea that was even a thing.
Yeah.
Like I just thought that's all for show. Like people do that on the show to make them look cool or whatever. Like, But then when you're actually hunting, you sit still and be quiet. Mm-hmm. Now I'll give him this, because I have hunted pretty hard in Arkansas since, and deer just don't respond to calling the same way there. Mm-hmm. So I'll give him that. And then when I moved to Kansas, I'm like, what? I'm going to try this whole grunt thing. Like I'm going to make an effort this year to try this. Mm-hmm. And I remember like even listening to podcasts, even listening to the juries, even listening to Waddell, like talk about how to grunt. I'm like, I'm not going to do it that much. Like that you're going way too far with this. Mm-hmm. And I just did it quiet every once in a while. And as I started seeing success with it, now I grunt all the time. I rattle all the time, snort wheeze all the time. And so I just encourage people, and not that I think that people still think that grunting and rattling are a bad thing, mm-hmm. but I guarantee you there's something in your mind that you think I could never do that, or this would hurt my hunt or whatever. And it won't.
Hunting experience using calls, it takes a little bit to get it. But so, I don't rattle all the time. It's very situational. I think you got to read what your window is. If a deer's acting a little weird, I'm not going to rattle at them. I thought there's potentially the biggest deer I've ever seen, or, highest scoring deer, biggest deer, however you want to word it, that I've ever seen and possibly could ever see on the hoof. And he's right there and he's not working to me and it's windy. He's not hearing my grunt. I snort wheeze at him. I know he didn't hear that. So I'm like, well, what's the worst? He walks away and I don't get him, or I rattle and he comes in and I can shoot him, and I rattled and he came in and I shot him. So it's, sometimes you got to try it. And that's the thing. You can't be afraid to try things. Here's that first buck. I don't know if it'll show on the screen here,
that's a good problem to have.
This is
it might not fit in the screen, bro.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way. The Riverside platform's got a thinner. This is the decoy buck.
That's cool. Just so you know, it will show up. Like when we do the episode, it'll show your full screen so people don't see it really.
To see how messy my background is. Okay, so there's the first one. Sure. And then if you don't mind, I'll get up and grab that other one real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Just for a visual.
I'll tell you the problem with my studio. My studio is detached from the house.
Yeah.
So earlier when you were saying why build a studio if you're just going to have remote, I was like, well, that's what I did. But,
well, no, I didn't mean it that way.
I know you did.
Because for the longest time, man, I just had a bedroom at my house that we did, that we dressed up. But there's a second deer. So he's just got kickers and stickers, and they're all a little longer than everybody thinks, just a good buck, good typical frame, good fours. So
that's awesome, dude.
Pumped. Good season.
The problem with my shop right now is that's where Santa's hiding all his presents until Christmas. So I've got like 412 boxes back here, and every day my wife's like, make sure and move the boxes out before the kids get home off the porch. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So that's just piling up. I got a basketball goal in here because that's what I hope my kids don't listen to my podcast ever, but that's one of the things Santa's bringing them as a basketball goal. So,
cool.
So that's the problem with my studio right now.
Basketball hoop?
Yeah, like the whole goal.
It's a basketball hoop.
Yeah.
I've never heard it called a basketball goal.
Well, maybe you're just weird.
I don't know, man.
I don't know.
I think you're weird on that one, but okay. I got you.
Hold on. We're going to Google this. We're going to Google basketball goal.
Basketball hoop.
And see what comes up.
Maybe I'm wrong, but we're starting a basketball podcast now.
Yeah, dude. It comes right up, bro. I don't know if you can see. It's just a bunch of basketball goals. Okay. I've never heard of. Now, here's what I've always said. The hoop is the hoop, the basket at the top. But
let me get a third. Hey, Lee. I'm gonna get a third opinion here.
But if they're from
we'll see if that's
the Midwest.
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Hey, when someone shows you what's the thing you throw a basketball in, like the whole thing, what do you call it? Basketball hoop. What do you think if someone says basketball goal? Do you think that's weird? He said, "Yeah, you're weird."
Dang it!
But he's from Iowa, so maybe Iowa, Illinois,
maybe it's an Iowa thing. I didn't even think they played basketball in Iowa.
I think soccer has goals. Hockey has goals.
Okay, but hear me out. Here's what I call. I call the hoop the orange ring. Yeah. The hoop.
Yeah.
But then if I'm buying my kid a goal, that's the base and the pole and the backboard and the.
I got you.
I don't know.
I think maybe in the Midwest, it's just the hoop is like you kind of know it's all of it.
Yeah, maybe so.
Side quest. Maybe. Sorry, everybody.
I'm still not buying it though, because if I Google basketball goal, I get goals.
Yeah.
So,
all right, I'll agree.
I will say this: if it means anything to you, I'm going to give you that you were right, because the title for what I'm calling the goal on Dick's website is the Ignite in-ground basketball hoop. So, yeah, I guess I got to give it to you.
All right. Sorry.
And then if you go to Target, it says, stand up, standalone basketball hoop. So, dang it. You just come in here and change I just ruined your whole show. You ruined my whole life because I grew up a basketball player. So I don't know. Maybe just people from the South are dumb and they call things stupid things.
No. I mean, okay.
Let's people from the South are dumb.
What do you? No, I don't. I love Southern people, man. You guys are my favorite. Okay. Fizzy drink in a can. What do you call that?
Coke.
Everything's a Coke. No matter what.
100%.
Whether it's a Sprite or a Coke or a Pepsi or a Mountain Dew, it's a Coke.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
And when I grew up, you would order a Coke and they'd say, what kind? Pepsi.
Yeah. Okay. See, I love that. I'd say, that's cool to me.
I'll take a Coke. What? Okay. What kind? My parents wouldn't say no more soda for the day. They would say no more Coke for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we didn't drink Coke. That's what they would say.
Yeah.
But you would sit down and say, hey, I like a Coke. And then you want a root beer. Right. That's what, but it's still a Coke.
Yeah.
That's what I grew up with right there.
Yeah.
So.
See, that's what I expect. I think that's cool. That's I wish Midwest did that. I say soda.
So what do you call them? Soda or pop?
I think it's universal, but I say soda.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things I grew up like pecan.
Pecan. Okay. Let me ask you this: horns or antlers? Because a lot of the Southern guys say horns, even though they know they're not horns, they're antlers. They still just say horns.
I say antlers.
Yeah. Well, Pope and Young,
but
you kind of think about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I also live in the world where like they scrutinize you. Like if you like, so what do you call the deer that's spelled Coues?
Coos.
Yeah. It's cow's deer.
Yeah. Yeah. I say coos.
And like, I still do, even though I know it's wrong. Cause
is that true? Is that right though? I think coos is favorable. It might
no, because it's actually
like,
it's actually named after the guy and his last name was Cows.
Is that they pronounce it that way? Yeah.
But everybody in the world calls them coos deer. Like, and really even people, the diehards that are like, they call them cows, but, yeah. And that's actually, there's actually apostrophe at the end of that because it's the like named after that guy. So
coos sounds better though. Cause if you say cows deer, it's like,
it's like, okay, what are you hunting here for real?
Yeah. It'd be like if you go to the Mexican restaurant, you're like, hey man, let me get and you say it like with that Hispanic flair to it. Everyone would be like, yeah, don't do that. It's weird. Just order the burrito and call it that.
Yeah. Then you sound racist.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, dude, that was, I'm never coming to a Mexican restaurant with you again.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? I don't know, maybe some of that, but.
No. And that, like, I don't talk about my dad that often, but you're making me, for some reason, talk about my dad a lot. But like, my dad was the dude when he walked into a Mexican restaurant that tried to speak Spanish and like just offended everyone in the whole place. And I'm like, Dad, stop.
Yeah.
Stop, dude.
Yeah.
Just quit. And turns out like he thought he made up this word. Like he thought that it just sounded cool and he made it up. And so he would say it to everybody. And just recently, like he said it my whole life. And just recently I asked a Mexican, I'm like, what does this mean? Like, and they're like, you're literally cussing somebody out. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like my dad's a pastor, dude. He's not. And I'm like, and so I call my dad. He's like, no, I made that up. Like I just come up with a funny sounding Mexican. And I'm like, it really is Spanish, dude. And you're offending a lot of people, just so you know.
That's hilarious. I'm sure all the Mexicans at the Mexican joints you guys had dinner at probably thought it was funny or just that he was messing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So can you have 2 bucks in Iowa or did you kill those in different states?
I live in Illinois. We're in Illinois.
Oh, so can you have 2 bucks in Illinois or did you kill those in different states?
Nope. They're same state, Illinois. As a resident, you get 2 either sex buck tags and you can do that with a bow. So
you killed 2 tankers, both in the same state.
Yeah. Back to back.
That's incredible, dude.
Yeah. Back to back sits.
Wow.
So yeah, it was just
like back to back sits is in like days or just
no, like literally like Sunday, I killed that buck over the decoy on Sunday night. And then, like I said, I hung out with my family, my kids. And then the next time I went hunting on that Thursday, I killed that big one.
Jiminy Christmas, dude.
Yeah. When it's good, it's good.
Wow.
So
yeah, I'd say so. I'm the king of 125s, dude.
Nothing wrong with that.
Like I own 125s. And what's funny is that is the minimum for Pope and Young. And so it's like all of my deer are right there. They're either an 1/8 inch small or an 1/8 inch big for making book.
Count it.
And I don't care, man. Like that is 100%. Like I've never played that game of like, whoa, I've got a 180 in here. I don't care if a 130 walks by and I'm happy with it. I'm smoking it, dude.
That's the thing. And shoot what makes you happy. But it's funny you bring that up. So Bucky was in town last week hunting, and Bucky's an official measure in OM for Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett. And I go back and forth with, I don't know, I think kind of controversial, probably like in a fun way. And that's also probably helps me for the podcast because I can just generate conversation out of thin air. But Bucky's like, man, you need to enter your deer. Like I have 4 deer entered prior to Bucky. He's like, when I come down, let's just get to work and we'll enter the rest of your deer. So I'm like, all right. And there's a few, my dad passed away in 2021 and my dad had 3 deer. One of them sitting right here is the first like rack buck. It's basically this deer is responsible for like fueling the passion, I think, for mine and my dad's hunting.
That's cool.
So that deer had I'd actually never taped it, never even just out of curiosity, never nothing. And I was really young when my dad shot that. So there's that one and 2 other ones that have never been taped. So I told Bucky, I'm like, man, can we get those measured, see what they go and enter them? I'm a measure as well. So I could technically measure my dad's deer and enter them, but Bucky's a good buddy. And I was like, it'd be special if you entered them for me. And he was pretty honored for that. So I got 3 deer being entered in my dad's honor, and then Bucky basically is entering everything for me that makes it up until this year. Obviously, they're not dry to enter, but not yet anyway, another month. But so yeah, Bucky came down, we put him to work. So he's been measuring his butt off down here at the studio, and we measured a couple of the guys' deer that have been in here sitting that haven't been officially taped up. So
that's cool, man.
We got a mess of interest
really
to send in the next 2 weeks or so. We're just gonna trickle them in and get them all entered. So
yeah, I don't have to worry about that because my dad, like I said, only hunts in Arkansas, and he also doesn't wait. So if there's a forky coming out,
awesome. By the way,
yeah. So I'll share this with you. I was in college and I was in class and I get a phone call from my dad, and so I ignored it. I'm sitting in class. Then he calls again, and I'm like, okay, maybe something's up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I walk out, and I'm like, what's up, dude? And he's like, just shot a doe. And I'm like, cool, man. I'm in class. I got to go. He's like, all right, see you. Love you. Bye. I go back into class, and my phone rings again. And I'm like, so I ignored it again. Well, then he calls me again, and I'm like, okay, well, I know he's in the woods.
Yeah,
maybe something happened.
What happened to him? Yeah,
maybe he fell out of the tree or something when he was getting down. And so I step back out, and I'm like, what's up, dude? You all right? And he's like, I just shot another doe. And I'm like, all right, Dad, I'm in class. I got to go.
Yeah. And
he's like, all right, love you. Bye. And I go back into class, calls me again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, calls me again. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to feel really bad if something happened to my dad and I don't answer.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm like, but if something happened, why wouldn't you call my mom? Like, I'm in college 3 hours away. Like, anyways. So I step back out, and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe it. I shot that first doe, and then another doe come out, shot her too. Not 5 minutes later, dude, an 11-point walks out, so I smoke him too. And I'm like, Dad, all right, I got to go, man. If you kill any more deer, if I just text me, dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, love you, bye. And I'm like,
dude, he sounds
Jiminy
awesome.
Christmas.
He sounds awesome.
Yeah, he's legit.
Cardboard
He's
decoys,
legit, man.
Interrupting class. Yeah. I'm a fan.
And killing a whole bunch of deer in 5 minutes. Yeah.
He sounds like our people.
You would get along with him great. He is he's wild for sure.
I love that.
It's not often that a new company comes along in the archery world and just absolutely changes the game. However, that is exactly what Dialed Archery did when they entered the scene. Pretty much took the archery world by storm, and for good reason. Now, if you followed me, you know my review of the Arxos. There was some things I didn't like about the Arxos. However, when the proof was introduced, here's what they did. They took all of the customer feedback. They took all the customer feedback so well that I believe with the proof, they have created a perfect sight. They listened to what the archery world wanted and needed out of a sight. And that's what they got with the proof. It is completely redesigned. It's completely in every way. It's just a better sight. They have improved on every issue that people had with the Arxos, and they have created, in my opinion, an absolute bomb-proof sight. Completely customizable on the website. Colors, pin configuration, pin sizes, pin colors. Completely customizable. You get exactly what you want right out of the box. Guys, I would highly encourage you to go check out Dialed Archery for your next sight. You are going to get, here's what I promise you, you are going to get more yardage out of a sight tape. Now, for a guy who's relatively on the short side of a draw length, that's pretty important to me. I shoot a heavier arrow and I don't have an incredibly long draw length. So that rail giving me a little bit more out of my sight tape is something that's very important to me. However, all of the other features of the proof make a bomb-proof sight. You can throw that thing around the mountain. You can drag it through the mud. It's going to perform every single time because Dialed has created, in my opinion, with the proof, the perfect sight. Go check out dialedarchery.com for your next and your last bow sight. Man, I appreciate you so much coming on, man. It's been a blast. Can't wait to kick it with you. I'll see you at ATA.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
See you at some of the other shows. And then, of course, Pope and Young. Guys, come hang out. It's going to be a blast.
Yep.
We're kicking off convention for the very first time ever with a wild game showdown. Just for entering, you get a full Camp Chef cook system. So come show off your wild game cooking skills. We're going to have People's Choice Award. We're also going to have some celebrity judges there. So going to be a good time. I'm excited to kick off convention that way, but it's going to be fun. So come out and join us April 9th through the 12th in Glendale, Arizona. Weather's going to be great. We got a 3D shoot. We've got a golf tournament that you can enter in. It's just going to be a fun event. So, and the biggest display of bow harvested animals. I shouldn't say that. I actually hate when people say the word harvest. Bow killed animals. We kill them. We don't harvest them.
Yes.
Bow killed animals, the biggest display of bow killed trophies ever. So come to Glendale, Arizona, April 9th through the 12th. It's going to be a good time, and you'll get to see Curt. So
hopefully,
guys, thank you so much for listening. Y'all have a fantastic week.